on top of React. It's built on top of React, and it allows you to build full stack applications, and we'll see how. So that's the first thing. It gives you a client and a server. The client is built using React, and the server is using JavaScript as well, so like Node.js. You have both the client and the server. And Prisma is a next generation ORM for Node.js and TypeScript. So an ORM allows you to easily access a database. And we'll see how to get started with Prisma and how to install it and everything. But first, let's take a look at the starter branch. So this is the starter branch. This is a Next.js app with Tailwind CSS setup. So I have Tailwind CSS, I have Tailwind.config.js. This project also uses TypeScript. So that's why I have a tsconfig.json. And Next.js comes with TypeScript support out of the box, so you don't need to do anything. So like if I open my package.json file, I just install TypeScript and the types for React, create a tsconfig.json, and you're ready to go. And yeah, so like this is the first thing. Next.js comes with really cool features. So the first one is this pages directory. So I already have a couple of pages set up, and I have my app running at localhost 3000. I did that by running npm run dev. And this is what it will look like. So if you clone the starter branch, you install the dependencies, this is what you're going to see. So this is a feedback app. You're going to see just on the homepage, the index page, localhost 3000, just a form. And what's going to happen is users will submit their information and they'll give feedback. Feedback can either be feedback, an issue, or an idea. And after they submit, we'll be able to see all the feedback in the route called feedback. Now, this is hard-coded data. This is just what it will look like. And we'll be fetching the data from the database using Prisma. And also, depending on the time, we'll see if we can do dynamic routes where each feedback can be viewed in a page on its own. So each one of those items will have an ID, and we'll see how to do it in Next.js so that we can go to localhost 3000/feedback/ID. And yeah, and I'll be mentioning after I explain everything that I want to explain, kind of like next steps and how you can take this demo and add more features to it. For example, like authentication. So only logged in users, maybe with like certain emails, can see this, but like depending on the time. So I would say, let's go back to the code. And with Next.js, it has what is called file-based system routing. So inside this pages folder, every JavaScript file, or here it's TypeScript, is automatically a route. So this index page, this page, this is what you see on localhost 3000. Also, if anyone is having a hard time seeing my screen, let me know and I can zoom in. And yeah, so like I just, for this page, I just have a form validation library. It's called React Form. I also have framer motion for some animations, like when you click on the button. I also have just importing like an icon library and a toast library. So like whenever someone clicks submit, we'll be able to see kind of like a toast that pops up and says, okay, submission is kind of like it's been submitted successfully. And yeah, so like this is just React code, nothing special. If you don't know React, there are tons of resources out there to learn it. So yeah, definitely learn React first and then come back to Next.js, or learn React through Next.js, whatever you like. And yeah, so like this is it. And I have this page. So like I have this file, it's called feedback.tsx. And this is why I have this route, which is /feedback. I just export a React component and I have this page ready for me, which is super nice. So getting started with Prisma. So Prisma takes care of the database layer. Let me go back to the main page. So Prisma takes care of the database layer. It allows you to define your data model. So kind of like you will have different models, and you can also describe the different relations between them. And you can do a lot, and we'll see exactly how to do that. But what's cool about Prisma is that it also has great support for TypeScript. So with databases, traditionally, with Prisma, it supports different types of databases. And if you actually scroll, we support PostgreSQL, MySQL, SQLite, Microsoft SQL Server, and there's MongoDB in preview. And we also support other languages. But what happens is you define your data model using Prisma schema language. So this file, which we'll create for our app, this is how you define the different rows in your database and the different tables, the different columns and the different tables in your database, because we'll be working with PostgreSQL. And yeah, and then what happens is from this data model, what will happen is we can generate a type safe client where you will use a programming language. In our case, we'll be using TypeScript to interact with the database. And you can do, so like you can do all the operations that you would want to do. So create, read, update, and delete, and even like filtering, sorting, and a lot of cool stuff. And what's also, so like this is kind of like the first component of Prisma, which is Prisma Client, which is just, it's a query builder that you can use. And then there's Prisma Migrate. We'll see how to create a migration. So as your schema evolves, so like you'll update your schema.prisma file, what will happen is you'll use Prisma Migrate, which is part of the Prisma CLI, to just do the migration for you. You don't need to write any code for migrations, which you would do when you're working with like CrossSQL. And then finally, there's Prisma Studio, which is kind of like PHP-MyAdmin. I don't know if anyone's familiar. It allows you to view the data in your database. It's kind of like just an Excel sheet where you can see all of your data inside your database, and you can update them, you can delete them, and also see how to do it. So to get started with Prisma, all you need to do is, let me stop my server and say npm install as a development dependency. That's why I added -d. And then Prisma. This bigger. And now what you can actually do, you can say npx Prisma, npx Prisma init. And you'll see a new folder being created here. It's called, so like you have this folder called Prisma, and inside it, there's a schema.prisma file. So inside this file, this is where we'll define our database model. So when we look at our app, what we have is essentially just one model, like one table, and it's the table of feedbacks. So I can say model feedback, and immediately you'll see, okay, there's an issue. And since I'm working in PostgreSQL, what I need to do is actually have a primary key. So I can say ID, and it's going to be a striped string. And at default, we'll say this is a UID. And to specify that this is a primary key, I have to say at ID. And also, I want to have a created at field. That's useful. So it's datetime. Now, as you notice, there's type completion, and that's because there's the Prisma extension. So if you go, I'm inside VS Code. So if you just say Prisma, you'll see this extension, which adds syntax highlighting. It auto-completes your code, and it does a lot of cool stuff. And yeah, so going back, I can say create add, this is datetime, and I can make this the default, I give it a default value of now, so that whenever a new item is inserted, a new row is inserted in my database, I'll give it a created at field with the date that it was created at. And then I can also say updated at, because that's also useful. Updated at, it's also going to be datetime. And I can say at updated at. And as I can auto format. And then when thinking about each feedback, looking back at the example, we can see that each feedback, we have a name, an email, a message, and a feedback type. So what we can do is say, okay, we can say name, this is a string. We can say an email, also a string. And we can say message, which will also be a string. Now, you can also have other stuff. So like other data types if you want, depending on your use case. So say, for example, I say age, and I can see the different data types. So there's big int, there's Boolean, there's datetime, decimal, and yeah, a lot of different data types that you can have. And now all of these fields by default are required. So if we don't provide them while we're creating a new feedback, we will get an error. Now, if we want, say, for example, the name to be optional, we can just add a question mark. And yeah, I think that's it. The last thing that we need is a feedback type. Now, since we're working with PostgreSQL supports a really cool feature, and it's enums. So enums are basically like it's a field that can only have a certain value. So you can say enum feedback type, and it should have at least one value. So we can say feedback is, it's kind of like the default. And let's make it all caps. And I can say issue, and I can say idea. So depending on like the type of message that the user can pick. And then I can just say feedback type and specify that it's of type feedback type. And I can also give it a default value of feedback. So yeah, that's it. That's our data model. Now we actually need a database. We haven't created a database yet. Now there are many ways to set up a database to use it with Prisma. So there are just tons of database providers, but the one I'll be using is Heroku through Prisma's data platform. So if I actually go to cloud.prisma.io, this is our cloud product. So what happens is this product allows you to easily collaborate on your Prisma projects with your team. So I can create a new project, and I actually have two options. I can import an existing GitHub repo and then link my database, or I can create a new project from scratch. So when starting from scratch, I'll just click create a new project. And this is my GitHub account. I already connected it, and I logged in. So if it's your first time, you will need to just accept it and connect to it. And you specify the project name. So I can say project name is CityJS if I want, and I can click create project. So this step, I will have a GitHub repo created for me. It's going to be private by default. And then I can click create database. So I already have a Heroku account. I'm logged in, and I provisioned a new database using Heroku. But in this step, I can also connect a database if I want. And yeah, this also creates a Heroku app. So if I go to heroku.com and go to my account, I will have an app created for me. Now in this step, I can also pick a schema, but I don't need it because I already have my own schema. And you can also have sample data. So this actually seeds your database, and we'll see how you can seed your database. But there are just different examples. I can just say, let's actually pick one of them. Let's pick the URL shortener. And you can see the model. You can say create schema. So if you actually just want to play around with Prisma, this is a really nice way to do it. Just Prisma on its own. And you will see there are just multiple tabs. So this is like the query console where you can run queries that just fetches data from your database. And this is Prisma Client, which we'll set up in our project. And you can just run a query, and you'll see kind of like the data. And this is the data that's inside the database, but the database provisioned by Prisma Cloud. And if I want, I can get the connection string from Heroku, but I'll stick to working with PostgreSQL locally, and I'll show you how I do it. And yeah, so this is the query console. You can also see this is a hosted Prisma Studio. So with Prisma Studio, the one I'll be using is locally on my machine. It's included in the Prisma CLI, and you'll be able to see the different models, and you can just do CRUD operations here. I can select it, I can delete it, I can pick a field, I can update it, and it will automatically be updated. And then if I want, I can manage members and I can invite people, and they will have different roles depending on what I can do. So I can say invite user, and I can give them a role if they're an admin, so they can do whatever they want. If they're a developer, so they have read and write access. And yeah, and like you can see the different roles, or like the viewer only. And I can also delete the project if I want. Let's just cancel. And yeah, so like I'm working with PostgreSQL locally. So I have, I'm on a Mac. So if you go to postgres.app, I believe, wait, no, there's an extra S. Right, yeah. So postgres.app, if you're on a Mac, you can easily download it and install it. And you can easily just have a local PostgreSQL database. And yeah, so like to connect to Prisma, to connect to a database, you will need a connection string. So the connection string, you'll find you have to include it in your environment variable file. So like it's .env. And in the Prisma schema, we're loading it from our .env file with a variable called database URL. So if I actually open up my env file, I'll see this. So I already updated my connection string with my local PostgreSQL connection string. So this connects to my local database. And this is just the username of my laptop, and it's at localhost, and this is the port. And yeah, so like this is how you would connect to the database. Now, so far, my database is empty. So I actually, my database is not aware of all of these models that I defined. And if I go to the hosted database, it's the same thing. So what we need to do is actually create a migration. So a migration is you creating the different tables and columns in your database. So to do that, you just need to say npx Prisma db push. Now, there's also npx Prisma migrate, which is a different command. And like the only difference between db push and Prisma migrate is that with Prisma db push, you don't generate a migrations history. So a migration history is a file that specifies it's a history. It's different checkpoints for your database and how it evolved. But we don't need that right now. So I can just say Prisma db push. And after I wait, it said that it loaded my environment variable from .env and my schema also as well. And yeah, and that's really it. And if I go to my database, I'll see that I'll have the different rows and columns created. And it also generated for me Prisma Client, which we'll get to in a sec. So if I say npx Prisma Studio, this will open for me what is kind of like the data browser, but it's locally here. Now, I already have some data in my database. I thought my database was empty, but apparently it's not. And yeah, I'll show you how to populate this database. So if we wanted, we could have said add record, added a name, an email, and a message. And if, for example, if I try to add a record and I didn't provide the data, like it shouldn't work. I believe this won't work because these fields are required. Did I hit save? But yeah, I don't know, maybe it's a bug. But yeah, so this is one way to add data, but there's another way, and it's to create your own seeding script. So for a seeding script, what it means is this is a script that will run that will populate the database. And actually, before I continue, I feel like I've said a lot of stuff. If anyone has like any questions, feel free to just send them. And let me just check. Okay, there are no questions. But yeah, so anyway, where was I? Seeding the database. So if you want to seed your database, what you would do is you just create a new file, call it seed.ts. I'm creating it in my Prisma folder, but you don't have to. And inside this file, you will write Prisma queries, and these queries will populate the database. So to actually get started, I can just say import Prisma Client because I have it installed. Okay, I don't have it installed. So if I say, let me just stop my server, check. Yeah, I have it installed. And it was installed automatically when I ran db push. So if I say import Prisma Client from Prisma Client. And then I want to instantiate Prisma Client. So I'll just say const Prisma equals new Prisma Client. So now, if I actually want to create any queries, I can just say, now Prisma by default, you have to call it inside like an asynchronous function. So say, for example, I say const main. This is going to be, let's export it. Const main equals a function. And let's make it async. And I can then say const feedback equals await Prisma. And then since Prisma is like it auto-generated for me types, I can just say dot, and I can see all the different operations that I can do. And I can see the models that I have in my schema.prisma file. So I have a feedback model, and that's why I have it here. So I can just say hit enter. And again, I can see all the different operations that I can do. So say I want to find many, this will return all of the records in my feedback table. And when I read here, I can see that there's documentation inside my query. I can see, okay, kind of like what I can do with examples. So find many doesn't require any parameters. But if you want, you can pass maybe like a parameter to return only 10 items. Maybe you want to filter by using like the select field. So yeah, you can do that. And yeah, so like if I want to seed my database, all I need to do is actually just go to my package.json. And I already have this defined is to create this, to add this object. So you have the Prisma key, and inside it, you'll have the key also, you have this field called seed. And yeah, I'm just using TS Node, which I also installed it. This will allow me to run TypeScript files. And I have this -0 module common.js. This is required because I'm working with Next.js. If you're not using Next.js, you would just say TS Node Prisma /c.ts. Or you can actually run any type of script that you want. It doesn't have to be a TypeScript file. It can be a bash script or a PostgreSQL script or whatever you want. So it's up to you really. And yeah, so like if I actually want to run the seeding script, it will fail because I think actually it won't fail, but it won't make a huge difference because like let's actually define some data. So if I say I don't actually need to await, let's say const I don't know, new feedback equals await Prisma dot, we want to dot feedback dot create. And I automatically get an error here because create requires one argument, and it's an object where you specify data. So like so like the parameters that we need to create a new item. So I can just say here, I have the email and message required, and that's why I also have the red squiggly line. But yeah, it said not assignable, just have TypeScript errors. But if you scroll down, you'll be able to understand, okay, what is needed. Yeah, so if you say data, and actually to show like auto-completion, I'm just hitting control space. So if I say email, let's say it's just test@gmail.com. This is my favorite testing email. And then I can say message, and I can say hello from seeding script. And then what I want to do, now I don't have any errors. And that's because the name, I made it optional. So in case someone doesn't want to provide their name. I can just say name, and let's name Mahmoud. And I can hit save. So now I believe if I run the script, it should work. And I say npx Prisma dbseed, and I enter. We'll see if it executes. And the C command has been executed. Now, if I actually want to see if it ran, I can just open up Prisma Studio. I can say npx Prisma Studio. And it should be added here. There's another one. Wait, it hasn't been added? I think it might not have worked, which is weird. But yeah, anyway, I'll fix it later. We'll see if it's like, wait, I think I know why it didn't run. Actually, I think there's an issue. Like, I think it should return. I didn't provide the feedback type and it's required. Oh yeah, there's a default value. But yeah, I'm not sure. So anyway, we can move on. And let's go back. Wait, there's a question. I had a question. The Prisma SDL look very familiar to GraphQL. Are both Prisma and GraphQL related? Not at all. So Prisma is only kind of like you only care about the database layer with Prisma. GraphQL is for your API. So with GraphQL, what you'll have is you'll have your GraphQL schema, and in the schema you define the different queries and mutations. And for each query and mutation, what will happen is you will define the implementation detail. So you can then fetch data from a database or to or like a third-party API or something. Like it depends really. So you can use Prisma with GraphQL, but Prisma on its own is not related to GraphQL. It's just the database layer. And yeah, you can replace Prisma with maybe like, I don't know, raw SQL, another ORM, like whatever you want. But yeah, they're just completely unrelated. And then Ali says, should be inside quotes. I don't think so. I don't think it's an issue. Like, yeah, you don't actually have to include it in quotes. It should be not within quotes. But yeah, it doesn't matter. I think I have the seeding script for the final thing. Let me just copy it. This one. And like instead of exporting, so instead of like there's an async function and you call it, I think maybe I should not have exported. But yeah, like now if I actually save and I run, I can say npx Prisma dbseed, and it should run successfully without any issues. And let's say npx Prisma Studio again. I should have like the same data duplicated. So I'm just bring it to this tab and it worked. So now I have like the same data. So like I already ran the seeding script before we started. So yeah, well, like now I ran again. So you can see this one and this one are identical. And yeah, so like now you learned so far what is Prisma, how to create your own database schema using the Prisma schema language. And you also learned like this is like Next.js and what makes it special. And kind of like, so like it has file-based system routing, but also there's just more stuff that we'll be covering in a bit. And you also learned how to seed your data. And you also saw how you can easily provision a database using Prisma Cloud. You also like Prisma Data Platform. And you also saw a lot of stuff. So if at any point you feel like asking questions, now is the time. Like I'm looking at them right now. And sec, zoom, and let's go back to my editor. And there aren't questions. Okay, cool. So now we actually have the database set up. What we actually need is to create Prisma Client, like instantiate it. So the seeding script runs when you call dbseed, but we want to create like a client, a Prisma client that we can use kind of like across our app. So to do that, I'll just create a lib folder. This is where I define kind of like anything. So like if I want to initialize something, I'll do it in this folder. So maybe, I don't know, I'm initializing a GraphQL client, I'll do it in this folder, or Prisma, I also do it here, Stripe, whatever, I'll do it in this folder. So I can just say Prisma.ts. And while you can just say import Prisma and then create a new client and export it and just import it everywhere, with Next.js, there's just one tiny requirement that you need to do. So I'll just copy the script here. And so like Next.js, what's cool about it is that it has fast refresh. And with Prisma Client, you're connected to the database. So what happens every time you hit save, a new connection gets created, which like exhausts your database. So the solution is when you're in development is to attach Prisma Client to so like the global Node.js object. And that's what we're doing here. So we're saying declare global and then Prisma, and this can be either be Prisma Client or undefined. And then we're exporting Prisma. So either we assign global.prisma or a new Prisma client. And what we're doing is we're just checking if we're not in production. And if we're not in production, then global.prisma will be Prisma. But if we are not in production, then we'll create a new Prisma client. And like when the app is deployed. So now that that's done, now let's talk a bit more about Next.js and what makes it special. So with Next.js, there are different ways to fetch your data. If you actually go to the Next.js docs, there's a whole page on it, and there's data fetching. So with Next.js, you can fetch data at different times. So like you can fetch data at build time. This is using getStaticProps. This is static generation. This is useful if you have pages that are just static and they won't change. So instead of making a request to like the server to render these pages, you don't need to do that. You just do that at build time. For example, a blog or like a marketing page, you would use that. Now, you can also like not just, so like if you want to build, let's say if you have a blog with multiple pages, you won't create like each individual page as a file. And someone, I think you have to mute yourself. 1 sec. And okay, cool. So anyway, also we'll most likely go over the hour or like, but yeah, we'll see. And yeah, so like with, you can fetch data using getStaticProps. You can also do server-side rendering where you fetch data and then you return. So like when you make a request to the server, the page gets rendered on the server with like the data inside it. So you can use Prisma and like getServerSideProps, and we'll see how. And yeah, so like this is really it. And you can also do something else where you can define API endpoints using Next.js. So you can say here, you can define this folder, it's called API. And each file inside this API folder automatically becomes an endpoint. So what we want to do is just say create.ts. So Next.js, what it will do for us, it will create an API endpoint for us, and we can execute server-side logic in this file. So what this means is we can say import Prisma from our lib folder, and then we can define a function. It's an asynchronous function. We can say export default function. That has to be async, and let's call it handler. It takes a request and a response. If you're familiar with Express, this is very similar. And then inside this function, we can say like try, then catch, in case there are any errors. And yeah, and like here, we can say in case there's an error, we can say res.status, maybe like make it 400, and then say .json, and pass in the error if you want. So this is in case there's any errors, and then we can fetch the, like in the same way, this is an API, we can get the kind of like what, the name from the front end, the email, the feedback type, And we also can get, what else do we need? The message from the request's body. So that's how I do it. And then I can just say, what do we want? We want to create. So I can just say const, maybe call it submission equals await Prisma dot feedback dot create. And again, pass in my data object and then include an email. So this will be the email coming from the request. And again, the name, the feedback type, and the message. So yeah, this is the submission. And this will run. And actually, we don't need to store anything since this is just creating. But like say if this endpoint you're reading data from Prisma, you would want to return the data in the response, but we don't need to do that. We can just say res.status 200, so like it's successful, and then send a message that says, let's do a message and say submitted successfully. So this is an API endpoint. And now from our front end, what we can do is just call this endpoint using fetch. And what will happen is, well, it will execute and we can save data in the database. So if I go to my pages, go to index, and let's close this. So I already have, so like React Hot Toast, this is a toast library that will show the message out. So like as we're sending it, this is just like extra for me. Like I like making things look pretty. So wait, we have a question. Shouldn't the disconnect stop the connection after every query? No. So like with the seeding, I'm only like, this is just part of the seeding. It's actually not required. Prisma does it for you. And so you don't need to explicitly call it. And then it says Prisma Client runs only on the server. Yeah. So like Prisma Client, you would use it to access your database. And to access your database, you have to do that on the server. Otherwise, technically, anyone can access your database, and you don't want that. And yeah, because, well, your database, you have your environment variable, which is loaded on the server, and you make a request to your database. So that's why Prisma Client runs only on the server. And yeah, and like, even if like you're talking about React, there's like React server components, which is, it's been announced, I think, early this year. And I wrote an article about it. And like with React server components, the components are rendered on the server. So then using React server components, you can use Prisma, but again, it's on the server. So you can't call Prisma Client from your front end. Otherwise, technically anyone can call it, and you don't want that. And yeah, so like I have this asynchronous function that's called create, and it takes a parameter called data. And this data comes from the onSubmit that I have on the form. So to remember, if I go to my index route, it's not running anymore. So let's actually run the app and say npm run dev. It's running and we refresh. So like this form, when I click submit, I have like everything required and we'll show form validation. But what will happen is when I fill all these forms and I submit, I will have this data available to me. This is because I'm using React Hook Form, and it's a super nice library for working with forms. And yeah, and what I'm doing is in the onSubmit handler, I'm calling like this toast.promise, which will show the toast as I'm submitting the data as just nice user experience. And I'm calling this create function here. So in this create function, what I will do is I will add the logic for fetching the data from my endpoints. And just one sec. Okay, so I'll be just using the fetch API because this is just submitting data. So I can just say fetch. It takes a URL. So let's just write the full URL, localhost 3000. Yeah, that's correct. /API/create. And then what I want, since this will be a post request, I actually want to pass a parameter. So this is an object, and inside the object, there's the body. And this body takes also an object. So I'll just say JSON.stringify and say data. And also requires as method will be post. And then the final thing is the content type. So specifying the headers and say content type and that it's JSON. So just say application/JSON. And yeah, this should work. So if I hit save and I go back and I fill this data, let's make it something that we can easily notice, put on like caps lock and say CityJS workshop. And this is the name. And we can say email is CityJS conf.org. I don't know, I don't think that's a real email. And let's say the feedback is, let's make it a feedback and just say, I don't know, this was awesome. And then when I hit submit, it should work, right? I specify this payback. And I call the function. Let me check. So I have this create function. I have on submit, and it should work. So let me actually check the network tab, live debugging, and I'll try. And let's go to the network tab. So let's refresh, right? And we'll be able to see, let's say, Mahmoud, and then test Gmail. Doesn't matter if there's a typo. And let's say message is like, hi. And then someone will hit submit. And yeah, feedback submitted successfully. I guess the issue was I needed to refresh. I'm not sure. So if I say feedback, and I actually haven't fetched data from the database here. This is just static. So let's actually do that right now. So inside, like we'll keep the suspense going. Like, did it work or did it not work? So if I go to the feedback page, what will happen is I'm just checking the time. Where we have time. And if we go to like right in the beginning, I'm loading feedback here. This is hard-coded from this folder, and it's called data. This is just an array where each item is a feedback. It has a message, and I'm showing hard-coded message because so that we're able to know that, okay, this is hard-coded because in the database, I had similar messages. So now I can say, let's delete this stuff. So with Next.js, we mentioned different data fetching strategies. We can create an endpoint and call it like feedback and make a request to it and get the response. But then we'll have to deal with like state, so like loading states, error states, and we can use libraries for that. So like there's React Query, there's SWR, which is created by Next.js, like the team behind Next.js, Vercel. But we can actually, inside each page, you can do what is called getServerSideProps. So getServerSideProps, you can just say export const getServerSideProps. And it is correct, equals async. This is an asynchronous function. And inside this function, this is the logic that gets executed on the server. So here, you can do whatever you want. You can make calls to a database, to an API where the API has secrets and you don't want to expose these secrets. But for us here, we want to call Prisma. Now, getServerSideProps returns an object. Inside this object, there's a props object. And the reason it's called getServerSideProps is that you make a request on the server, you fetch your data, and then this data goes back and you can access it as props. Like what we'll do is we'll just say feedback right here. And what will happen is we'll be able to render it like, so like we'll be able to render data that is fetched from the database like that. So like this is really a nice experience and we don't need to kind of like make a request and wait for it to load and like deal with states and all that stuff. So we can just say here, we can say this is like all feedback. So let's say const feedback equals await Prisma. We have to import it. It's not showing as an import. That's sad. So if I go to the top and I say import Prisma, this is the one we instantiated at the beginning. And let's go back and say await Prisma dot feedback dot find many. And we don't actually want to have any parameters. We can just leave it empty. And we then want to return this feedback as props. So we can just do that. And if we hit save, data should be fetched from the database and it should work. Let's hope it works. So I go back and okay, we have an issue reading from map. I think we just have to refresh. Okay, so this error is very common for anyone using Prisma for the first time with Next.js. And what happens is with Prisma, we have a created at and an updated at fields. And Next.js by default doesn't serialize dates. So there are two solutions. Either you cannot install a library, it's called SuperJSON. This was created by the creators of Blitz.js. It's a framework that also actually uses Prisma. It's built in, but it's like it's built on top of Next.js and comes with really cool features. You should definitely check it out. But yeah, so like we haven't serialized dates. So the solution like that we can do right now is just actually not return the dates from our Prisma query. So we can just say in find many, we can have this select. So select, when you hover over it, we should get some docs. We actually say select. Yeah, so we can actually see what type of data we want to just, well, select. So if I say I want the email and we have to say true, and we can say also message, and you just have to say true. And we can just say the name, also true. And we also want the feedback type and we'll include it. So true. So now when we hit save and we refresh and go back and to look at 3000 and it works. So like this is the one that I just submitted. So now it works. And yeah, let me just check if there are just any questions. This is a moment of celebration and there aren't any questions. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. But yeah, it's like so far, like just to recap what we did. Yeah, it was awesome. Thanks, Ahmad. And so what we just did is we created a full stack app. I have a starter, but to actually get started with Next.js, you can just use the Next.js CLI. And yeah, thanks everyone. First time you see Prisma in action. Cool. Well, hopefully you're convinced for like how easy it is to get started with it. So I just have a Next.js app that I set up. I installed Prisma. I defined my database models. And what happened was then I just created an API endpoint using Next.js. And or I can just make a request right away using getServerSideProps. And yeah, that's how easy it is to just have a full stack app. Now, if you want to add authentication, you can just install NextAuth. So if you just Google NextAuth, it's like nextauthjs.org. They currently have the beta v4 and the documentation is set to v4. So when you install it, make sure that you either install the beta or you're on like the right version of the docs. But NextAuth is just very easy to add authentication. So if I actually just go to get started and you go to just an example, all you need to do is like in your API folder, you would go to pages, API, and create a new folder. You call it auth. And inside this folder, you create a new file and call it just auth like that. Auth, leave, right? NextAuth. And it's 3 dots, .ts. Let me just double check. And yeah, it's like this. And make sure you don't do any typos because I do lots of typos, as you can see. But yeah, so this is what you would do it. you can also use it with Prisma. There's a Prisma adapter. So if you want to do session-based authentication and store your users in the database, you can do that. So if you actually go to providers, no, not providers, adapters and Prisma adapter, you need to install the Prisma adapter, and you also need to have Prisma Client along with Prisma plus NextAuth installed. And you then configure it here. And yeah, you have different providers. You can use Google, GitHub, you can use there's just so many, like all of these, I think. Yeah, there are a lot of providers. You can even do Magic Link. You can also do lots of cool stuff. So yeah, and I think I might, let's just add something one. Should you use the legacy one? No, you shouldn't. And so I believe, Kai, you're referring to the, what's it called? Like the adapter? No, you should use the updated one, not the legacy one. And yeah, so the final thing that I wanted to mention, and we can wrap up, is if you go to, I have this folder that I haven't mentioned, and it's called feedback. And then there's this file, it's called ID. So this is something that is just very cool about Next.js, and it's dynamic routing. So if I actually go to here, and I want to be able to just, let's say this message was just super long, and a user had they just wanted to say how much they love this app. So what will happen is we want to be able to just go to this individual feedback item, and we want is each feedback item, it has an ID. So what I want is when I say /feedback/ID, like a number, for example, so let's say 1, I want to display one of them. So I already have this set up. So it always returns, hi there, I'm a demo message. But if I go back and I open this file, so this is just a regular JavaScript function, just a regular React component. And what's going to happen is, well, this, depending on the ID that I pass, I will just have a different page based on each ID. So the ID, I can get the ID from the actual parameters. So when someone actually says, okay, feedback / whatever ID, I can get that ID and then look in my database using Prisma to actually fetch that record. So I can say, someone open their microphone. Do you mind muting? Yes, thank you. So what happens, I can get from the parameters from the request, so from a URL, and then I can just call Prisma here to return the individual feedback by its ID, just an individual row, and then it's available to me as a prop, and I can just see it. So if I just say here, let's say const feedback item, that's what I called it, because I equals await Prisma dot feedback dot find unique. This one returns an item by a unique identifier. For us, it's the ID. And you can see just an example here. You just provide a filter here, and I'll be filtering by the ID. So if I just hit control, you just say where, and then you say ID, and I'm passing in the ID from the context.params.id. And that's really it. And this will return the individual feedback item. And you have to go, yeah, sure, I'm wrapping up. And then what will happen is I can just pass this feedback item as a prop right here. And yeah, so if I hit save, and I have this feedback item coming from props, and I can go back, I'll be able to go to each one of those, but they're undefined for some reason. But if I can find the ID, so if I actually log this and feedback item, and I go to just say I get the ID from one of those here, and I go to my feedback app /ID. No, didn't copy it. Wait 1 sec. Come on. It's not copying for some reason. well, yeah. So like what's going to happen right now is if I just go to that ID, I'll be able to just load that item. And yeah, that's it. So we kind of covered a lot of stuff, and I'll be updating this repo right here with like all the steps. So you don't have to worry if you're someone who just prefers reading, you can just, yeah, like go through this repo. And yeah, thank you so much everyone for attending and watching. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Hi, Mahmoud. One question. This is Oscar. I got the last 20 minutes because the timing was wrong. That's why 3 people joined at 9 a.m. It said it was at 4 p.m. Greenwich time, which was 9 p.m. anyway. But I got the last 20 minutes. Is the recording available or what's?
Yeah, this will be recorded. I'm really sorry. You DM'd me, right?
Yeah, I DM you and then I got
I'm really
everything
sorry.
ready.
I got confused also with like the time
Okay.
zones. But yeah, I'm
It
sorry. So
got confused. And 3 other people just joined too, so they missed it anyway.
Yeah, well, anyway, if you have any questions, feel free to DM me anytime. Sorry about like the whole time zones. Time zones are just confusing. But yeah, like I'm at like on Twitter, I'm like at this is Mahmoud. Let me just underscore.
And
the
recording will be available in where will be the recording available, Mahmoud?
We will
I'm not sure yet.
online. Yeah. We will let you know after the thing. Sorry, but we are very busy with the conference.
Right. Yeah, for 3 of us, we missed it, but
don't worry, we will do it
don't worry.
again.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
You're welcome. So thanks everyone for joining. I'm going to wrap up right now. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out anytime. And yeah, thank you for joining.